So I've been putting out videos talking about how much I love Troy, but I thought I would put out one video talking about some mistakes I think there are with Troy. Without further ado, here are 8 mistakes I think Troy made that I wish they didn't, so it could be even more of a masterpiece than it is. Starting with the fact that there are some things that, okay, the Iliad did better when it comes to, okay, I kind of get it's trying to go for this idea that all these kings come because Agamemnon is in charge of them, and Agamemnon says they have to come. But I kind of prefer the oath of Tyndareus, whereas they came because they were obligated to because Paris stole Helen. I personally think that makes more sense why they would be there. But again, I do understand the fact that, okay, when Menelaus dies, that would kind of remove their oath, and so why would they even need to be there anymore? Which is kind of what Odysseus was trying to say, that okay, Menelaus is dead now, it doesn't matter. And because Agamemnon says no, we have to stay, they all have to stay because Agamemnon's in charge of them. Again, I kind of do like the oath of Tyndareus better. Yeah, I feel like it makes more sense than just they have to come because Agamemnon tells them they have to come. It's like, okay, it gives Agamemnon more power, but I feel like it's a kind of takes away from the reason why they had to come in the first place. And the next problem is the fact that they need to make the Achaeans and the Trojans stand out more on the battlefield. It kind of just looked like two bronze armies fighting against each other, and I get it, that's probably that's how it would have probably looked. They gave some distinctions between the Achaeans and the Trojans, but really when it came down to it, they both just looked like the same army, and so it was hard to keep up with who was who. My introduction to this story was Kurla Kid's The Trojan Horse, and so you had it so the Achaeans were in blue, the Trojans were in red. I was always a fan of the Trojans because my favorite color was red as a kid, and so but it was easy to tell who was who in the battlefield. That was a kid's movie, so it didn't have much for a battle. But if they had done something where the armor really stood out, this is one person's armor, have the Achaeans have brighter armor or something like that. Then it's easy to figure out which side is which. And so it was kind of hard to tell, and I get it, that's more accurate a little bit, but in the same way, I thought it would be cool if they had that distinction, because it is a movie and we need to keep up with who's who and which side is winning, which side is losing at that moment. The next problem is there's so many scenes where okay, this movie is R-rated, but man, there's one moment where you have the armies clash and you just have this spray of blood, but outside of that, there's really not much blood. And I'm like, okay, I would have loved to have more decapitations, more brutal deaths. I remember when I first heard that this movie existed was when I was in my history class. My teacher, as we were reading the book, he's like, "Wait, this is a very violent story. I wonder if they made any movies of this." And he looked up "Yep, there's a movie called Troy, and it's R-rated. Makes sense." And then when I finally watched the movie when I was 16, I'm like, "But it's not that gruesome." I'm like, "Have you read the Iliad?" Very clearly, I remember first time reading it, be like, "Whoa, okay," and it just suddenly just mentioned how Achilles stabbed a spear through someone's stomach up to the other side of their neck. Just that is a death. This movie is kind of shallow when it comes to that. It has some of it, but honestly, a lot of the R rating comes more from just nudity and stuff like that. I'm like, I wish there was more with just straight up violence. I'm like, it's the Iliad. Make some people die in some creative, disturbing ways. Maybe it's because I've become so desensitized by watching stuff like The Boys and shows like that where they have really brutal deaths that I'm like, oh yeah, awesome. I love this fight scenes, but it's not brutal enough in my opinion. Ajax has a hammer and he kills people by breaking their skulls open and stuff, but there's not that much blood. I'm like, I can't show any scenes on YouTube when it comes to the Boys or something like that, but imagine a Boys level, just bam, and just suddenly just blood and guts everywhere as Ajax's hammer hits this man. That would have been epic. And we didn't get that. I'm like, I wish we had got that. That would have been cool. Also, probably disturbing, but this is a movie about the Iliad. Make it disturbing. I'm sorry, have you read the Iliad? It is very disturbing. Brilliantly disturbing, but it is gruesome. It is super gruesome. On that topic of Ajax, I also felt they killed off Ajax way too quickly. It's and you saw him go up against Hector, but Hector wins and kills him. And it's okay, the point of that scene is, okay, it sets up okay, you only get one good battle with Hector when he's winning. And so you have to be, okay, he can't kill off Achilles, so who's the second best? Ajax. So let's have him kill off Ajax and show up how powerful the killer he is. I wish we had seen more of Ajax. Also on the same topic, we didn't get enough of Hector. It's when I was watching it this time around and I saw Hector's death, I'm like, come to think of it, we only got really one good battle scene with Hector. I'm like, before he dies. I'm like, you get enough with Hector that it's okay, his death still matters, but it's one of those things where I feel what makes it matter even more is just because I know that Iliad really well. I know Hector's character, but like if I had not read the Iliad and I was just going off of that movie, yes, it's 3 hours, but still it's like, okay, there might be some people who are like, I didn't get enough attached to Hector, and you needed more time to get attached to Hector. Again, we'll come back to our last point where it really goes into some of the big issue when it comes to these. And the last one before we get to the last point is that throughout the whole movie, they're setting up the idea that Paris is going to die when he refuses to get killed by Menelaus, and Menelaus gets killed by Hector. When like you see he's a coward for the whole movie, not because he's afraid of losing, because he's afraid of dying. And so at the end of the movie, when he's like, okay, he chooses to sacrifice himself, and so he comes in and he joins the fight, and he's the one who kills Achilles. He's fighting with his men, and then like the captain's like, "Wait, get out of here. Go be with your wife now," and he leaves. But before he leaves, of course, he goes and kills Achilles, and then he runs off with his cousin, Briseis, and they both leave. This time around, especially, I was like, hold on. They really was setting up in the movie this idea that Paris is going to die, and they should have had Paris die in that moment. You hear about his death in the Aeneid, and so I'm like, he does die in that battle. Like, please, just kill him off. Like, and now into the big problem that I have with this movie. Really what it comes down to is it probably should have been a TV show, like a miniseries. Really, that's what it should have been. The truth is, 3 hours is not enough for this story. It's a 24-book poem. It's not a small story, and I get it. Cut out most of the battles might be a good idea, but there was too much cut out where, like, it really stood out to me this last time watching it. It was like, okay, this movie, they had 2 battle scenes in the whole movie. 3, I guess, because you have the ending battle with just them sacking Troy. But it was like, there's only one full-on battle scene in the whole movie, and that was after the duel of Menelaus and Paris. That's the only, like, full-on, both armies fighting against each other. And you never, like, well, I guess you do kind of get the one when the Trojans try to attack the Achaean ship, and Patroclus comes out dressed in Achilles' armor and gets killed. But, like, really, it comes down to truly the battle is just, there's only one full-on fight in the whole story. And it's like, really, it should have had, you know, maybe a 3-part miniseries, 4-part miniseries, I don't know, something like that, where, you know, you have like the first one ends with Achilles dropping out of the battle, and then you have the second part is 2-hour-long episode where it's just battles the whole fight without Achilles, and then it ends with Patroclus' death and Achilles having to join the battle again. And then part 3, Achilles joins the battle again. He kills Hector. You have Hector's father come and ask for the body. You have the Trojan horse. You have and then that's where the movie ends. Like 3 parts, I guess. 3 parts. You could do it in 3 parts. Like that would have been better. Like have each of the acts in the movie as the 3-part series. Like I think it would have been better. 6-hour-long thing, something like that. Double the time, double the amount you could have in it, and really build up these characters, because these characters deserve to get a lot more. You know, you barely meet Odysseus for the whole movie. Like, why did they not ever make a Odyssey off of this? Like, from being as Odysseus in the Odyssey would have been cool. It would have been better than what we got with Christopher Nolan. So, like, Wolfgang Peterson sort of directed an Odyssey too, and had, like, both the Odyssey and the Iliad. Like, I remember after watching this movie, I think it might have been for the first time, or, like, the second time, I was just, like, immediately like, okay, let's go find a good Odyssey one. There are some versions of the Odyssey, but for the most part, we haven't had a good version of the Odyssey yet. And that was what Christopher Nolan's one was supposed to become, and it's not going to become that. So, hey, if maybe one day I can be one of those people who help make a good version of the Odyssey. You never know. Though I would prefer to make a adaptation of the Iliad. I just like the Iliad better. But so in the end, I do like Troy, but the big flaw I think with Troy is just the fact that it's way too short to tell this long of a story. And that's why I think it does a great job with saying, okay, let's narrow it down to just the main story we're telling here is the legacy of Achilles, his immortality, what drives him to do this. And that's what the story is about, and it really cuts out any other conflict at all. I mean, if it doesn't have to do with furthering that story, it just removes it. Everything is about that. You do have some stuff, you know, like the love stories going on, and they build them up pretty well, but like for the most part, it sticks to what it's trying to tell right there. And the Iliad is, even being a 24-book poem, it still has that overall, like, it's the anger of Achilles, that's what the story's about, but it has like a bunch of chapters where it's like, keep building this up by showing all these people dying. And it would have been cool to have, like, you know, a mini series. I feel like the Iliad really needs to be a fun show, like have the Homer epics as a show. You know, you have maybe first 3 seasons is the Iliad, and then you have season 4 and 5 as the Odyssey, and maybe have a sprinkles of a little scenes building up the Aeneid and stuff like that. That would have been cool, but we didn't get that. I don't know. I would have loved to have seen a true Homer adaptation that is accurate to what Homer wrote. I get it, you don't get that with Troy, but still, you get a great movie. So I love Troy, and I will continue to watch Troy all the time. But yeah, as a fan of the Iliad, I have to admit, sometimes I'm like, okay, please, you're missing so many great scenes. You're killing off characters way too quickly. You're not allowing them to breathe enough. So yeah, tell me your thoughts. Is there anything about Troy that really stands out to you? This is why I don't like Troy. Or, if there's anything you love about Troy, I'll also go check out the videos I put out about why Troy is such a great adaptation, or how they adapted Achilles and Agamemnon. Till next time, this has been the Movie Net Reviewer, Peter Wary, signing off.